93 days. That was how many days since she saw the world anew, since the hunger and the tempting words of the beast. At that time, Vicky didn't know how to put what she felt into words. She still couldn't. Desperation, fear, that little itch that never faded no matter how much she ate. She could devour an entire birthday cake herself and still never be full. They were all like that, vampires. Hardly any got to have that human experience of feeling stuffed, that they couldn't take another bite. The only thing that held Vicky back was her humanity. But sometimes she wondered if it was worth holding on to. She could lose control, let everything go, and then she'd relish in feeling full. But that would make her a murderer. Vicky, my sweet child, it's time to awaken. The man's voice guided her from the darkness. There were no dreams, no nightmares, just vacant. Her eyes slowly blinked open. The small loose skin of her eyelids stretched until they tore apart, giving her sight. Her vision adjusted to the dangling bulb overhead. It was a small light, yet so powerful. It was hard to move at first. Throughout the day, her body stiffened almost like she was dead. The silhouette of a bushy-haired man entered her vision. Combined with the voice, Vicky knew who it was, and her tension eased as she sank deeper into her coffin. Small fangs poked from between the man's smile, and his bright green eyes almost seemed to glow in the now dimmed lighting. It took everything within her not to run her fingers through his brown, curly hair. "How are you feeling?" he asked. His tone seemed all-knowing, which fit him, and he extended a hand. Vicky accepted the gesture and was easily lifted out as if she weighed nothing. It took her a second to adjust, more so to the weightless feeling of standing on her own 2 feet. "I'm hungry, Micah," she whined. "Do you have any food?" Normally, her stomach would be growling nonstop the second she felt hungry. This time, it didn't make a sound. Instead, there was a hollow feeling inside of her. His smile faded, replaced with pain. "You will eat, but it won't be human food." His tone was soft, whispering, like he was readying himself to tell her a secret, one meant only for them. "What?" Vicky asked. "I'm gonna take you on your first hunt." "My first hunt?" A black Honda Civic pulled up to a set of towering buildings. Light streamed from the windows in patchy patterns, and a few shadows danced within. It seemed like those people drew the unlucky straw that night. "What is this, an office building? What are we doing here?" Vicky asked, as she looked up at the tinted windows. But she knew the truth. What did vampires eat in movies, in TV shows, and in video games? Her throat tightened. While her stomach made no sound, it wasn't a silent beast, and his sensitive voice invaded her thoughts. Blood. It felt like a dog pulling on its leash, a vicious hound that was so close to breaking free. She had to satiate it, knew what it wanted, but she wasn't sure if she was up to the task just yet. "What is this inside of me?" she wondered. "Is there something wrong with me? Am I going crazy?" "There," Micah said. A security guard was posted at the front entrance, a bit chubby, but who knew how much muscle was tucked away under that pale blue button-up shirt. Another man approached him, flashed a badge, and walked past the guard to enter the building. Another unlucky soul the night shift had claimed. "You want me to?" Vicky asked. Micah rested a hand on her shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. He was freezing, but she knew her skin felt the same. They'd never experienced that warmth again, at least not from each other. "You're gonna be fine. You need to focus," Micah said. That all-knowing voice returned to the surface as he drew her attention back to him. "That man, you're gonna feed from him, and you'll feel better. That voice you're hearing, it'll go away." "Do you hear it too?" Vicky asked, with wide eyes. At least she wasn't alone. "I do. We all do. Kinda comes with the territory," he answered with a half-hearted smile. She feared she'd never see his real smile, to see him actually happy, and she wanted that more than blood. Vicky looked out the window towards her breakfast. "Do I have to kill him?" she asked. "Yes." The voice bounced off the walls of her skull, pounding where it echoed. She nearly grabbed her head as if it would ease the tension, but Micah's voice worked better than any Advil she ever took. "You don't have to kill. You could live like me and fight the beast. It won't be easy, but it'll return every time you feed. But you can do it just like I." Micah lifted his hand, wanting her to take it, to trust him. "I'll be here for you and make sure you never cross that line." Oh, such lies. But Vicky would sell her soul if it meant she could be at Micah's side. And in a way she had. Her calloused hand slipped into his and she smiled. His hand was soft, smooth, and cold. "I'll hold you to that." They easily crossed the parking lot, approaching the entrance. As they neared, Micah's hand slid from Vicky's and he disappeared into the shadows. The guard was none the wiser, only seeing Vicky as she walked up to him. "What do you want?" the guard asked with a huff. His eyes scanned her body, looking for anything out of the ordinary, if only he knew. Vicky did the same. She figured it was proper that she should know the man who was going to give her sustenance in such a personal way. He was large, wearing the typical light blue uniform. Said uniform was tight on him, and the buttons threatened to burst. His puffed cheeks were covered with deep dark freckles, and a majority of his face was hidden away by his red curly beard. "I was just wanting to talk to you," Vicky started with a smile. She tossed her hair behind her shoulders, mimicking what she'd seen in movies. It wasn't her, and it didn't have to be. She just had to seem less threatening than him. "You don't work here. You need to leave," he said, point blank. With a glare, his hand hovered over the gun at his side. "Wait. I was just hoping to talk to you about food." Vicky tried again, but she knew she was fumbling this. Her body tensed and she was ready to flee the second she felt her life was on the line. "Feed from him," the voice said. "No," Vicky responded. This whole beast thing was so annoying as she tried her best to curb it by remembering Micah's words. "The beast is dangerous. If you let it free, you might be able to rein it back in, but not until it's fully satiated. But by then, you might be in deeper shit than you were before." Those weren't exactly comforting words, but if it worked, then it worked. Vicky blinked, and the pistol was pointed at her face, the owner, the security guard. "You're going to back up," he instructed. And Vicky knew he wasn't playing around. Vicky did as she was told. Would I survive a shot straight through the skull? If zombies couldn't, then she doubted that vampires could. Micah left out this important tidbit during his lessons. One step back, she went. Then two. She didn't know if the weapon was loaded, but she wasn't taking the chance. "And backing up," she said, confirming her actions, and raised her hands. Micah moved through the shadows, easily sneaking behind the guard. In one swift movement, the security guard went limp, and Micah slowly lowered him to the ground. Afraid that they might have been caught, Vicky searched their surroundings. "Don't worry," Micah said with a smile. "I picked this place for a reason." He pointed upwards, more as a gesture than for her to actually look up. "No cameras," he explained. Vicky's shoulders slumped. "Now hurry and eat." As Micah scanned their surroundings, Vicky fell to her knees before the guard. She hesitated, mostly because this was all new to her, but the beast guided her. It didn't have to speak. Vicky let her fears go and allowed the beast to take control in that moment. She feared it would run rampant, but it remained subdued, probably because of the hunger, and it didn't want to let this meal go to waste. She lifted the security guard's head, bringing him to her lips. Carefully, she sank her fangs into his flesh. There was an initial resistance, but she broke through. Once she tapped the vein, she was in. The blood flowed into her mouth and couldn't have tasted any sweeter. She felt it run through her body, igniting her senses in ways that she never felt. She envisioned fireworks and happiness, but the beast wasn't satisfied. "Drink more." "You must stop now or you will kill him," Micah warned when he realized that Vicky wasn't slowing down. She couldn't stop, so she growled. Everything around her faded away. Micah no longer stood before her. Instead, it was the beast, a mirror of herself, encouraging her to finish her meal. "Victoria," Micah's voice probed, but the beast snarled in response in an attempt to snuff out the invader. It didn't want Vicky to hear her sire. If she did, then she would stop. Then it would never be over. Her fangs pierced the vein even deeper, and the guard's skin gradually lost color. "That's enough," Micah demanded. A hand grabbed Vicky's shoulder, and she was ripped away from the unconscious security guard. The man wavered between life and death, and it was clear which side of the fence he was about to fall on. Without Vicky's support, the guard's limp body fell to the ground. Vicky scrambled to crawl back to him, but Micah held her firm. "I just need a little," she begged. "No," Micah hissed. He forced her to the ground, her face eating the gravel as she continued to claw her way forward. The rocks cut her cheek, but she could easily heal if she just had a bit more blood. "What's going on out here?" a man asked as he rounded the corner of the building. Knowing that they just entered oh shit territory, Micah released Vicky to blend into the shadows as she jumped to her feet. She tried to mimic Micah, putting her faith into her beast once again, but it failed her. Unlike Micah, who could no longer be seen with the naked eye, Vicky stood right in the open and right next to the unconscious security guard. "Who are you?" the man asked. His eyes fell onto his comrade and he pulled out his gun. His body grew rigid and he knew something was wrong with the situation. "What did you do?" Vicky cursed. Her mind scrambled for an excuse, anything that might get her out of the situation. "I just saw him on the ground and came to check," Vicky explained. She stepped back with her arms raised, trying to come off as non-threatening. "What the fuck is on your face?" He trembled. Vicky lifted a hand to touch her lips. She felt the liquid coat her fingertips and didn't need to look at it. It was blood. Her entire mouth was coated. This was confirmed when her tongue unconsciously darted out for a taste. Even when alive, she was a pale person. Now, as a vampire, she could only imagine how obvious the red liquid would be. She was fucked. "Is that..." The name on the shirt read Andy, and the poor man couldn't stop from gagging. "What the fuck did you do? What the fuck did you do?" he repeated. He tried to make sense of the situation, but he couldn't. Some chick just ate his friend. There was blood. The man reached down for the walkie on his holster. Seeing this, Vicky bolted forward. But he had it to his lips before she could take a step. "I need assistance at the entrance. There's a crazy fucker over here that got Jacob." "Get back to the car." Micah's voice came through the darkness. It was haunted like a ghost. Vicky sprinted to Micah's sedan before she could make the situation any worse. They both got inside, and Micah took off as his corporeal form returned. "What the fuck was that? He was gonna report us and..." Vicky couldn't control her tone. She was hysterical. There was nothing that could have gone more wrong. Or so she thought, and she glared at her sire. "I was prepared for this," Micah said as he burst into laughter. Was this a game to him? "I took off the license on the cars, and we'll ditch this ride in a little bit. They won't be able to find us." "You made this sound so easy." But Micah's laughter never faded. She should have joined in, should have loved to hear his laugh, but she felt agitated. "You think this is funny? We could have got killed." Even though the laughter subsided, Micah's smile didn't fade. "We would have been fine. Might be in trouble with the Masquerade, but humans, they can't kill us. Not on their own anyways." Those words didn't sit right with Vicky, who couldn't comprehend their meaning. And what if they could? Vicky snapped. What if they found a way? This shifted Micah's smile. "You've got a lot to learn, Victoria, and I've got a lot to teach you." But that was the past. Vicky learned a lot from Micah, and even more without him. She steadily sucked in a breath. It was a habit, completely unnecessary, but it still somehow calmed her. "I need to figure out how to get into the warehouse," she coached herself. "Once I do that, I gotta deal with whatever's inside. Some men maybe, a few fellow kindred, none of them sounded appealing." Thanks to the thickening fog, Vicky had difficulties making out any security system the warehouse employed. She couldn't even make out the figures of any guards. It was as if they were shielded. Gonna have to play it extra safe. Dismounting her bike, she checked her clothes for her gear and her immediate surroundings. No one in sight and no movement in the distance as far as she could tell. It was going to be a gamble if she got to the warehouse in one piece. But she was willing to play. A simple in-and-out job, she thought to herself, as if it would boost her luck. This would all go easy assuming that the violet purchasing vampire wasn't there. And that was a big assumption. I got this. Sliding down the hill, she avoided the street lamps. If a human was scouting the place, they'd have little luck spotting her in the darkness. Passing the metal rolling doors, Vicky swerved to the side of the warehouse. A man leaned against the wall with a cigarette in hand. A trail of smoke slithered from his nose as he glanced up at the many twinkling stars. Too many for this time of year. While Vicky would have loved to admire the beauty of nature, her own eyes were locked at the pistol strapped on his holster, and then to the door at his side. Both of those would work in her favor, and from what she could tell, the man was definitely human. He was her walking, talking Happy Meal. Normally, she might have felt a tinge of guilt for feeding, but they kidnapped Violet. That made things different. She couldn't give a rat's ass what happened to this man or his little vampire boss. This will be quick and easy. She'd done it plenty of times before. Just wrap her arms around her victim and sink her fangs in. And as Vicky closed the distance, her fangs ached. She was ready for a taste. The sound of crunching grass sounded louder than it should have been. How could she have been so lost in thought? But it was too late to dwell on the should-haves and could-haves, as the man's head shot in her direction. Their eyes locked, and shock flashed across his face. It mimicked hers as she realized she was fucked. "Who's out there?" he demanded, the gun at his holster now pointed at her face. Okay, maybe he couldn't see her exactly. He could see something in the darkness, but there was hesitation. Vicky went still. If she could make him feel crazy, make him think that this was all in his head, then she'd use that to her advantage. The gun wavered, more hesitation, and lowered. This whole thing is messing with my brain. Why the boss gotta tell me about vamps? This shit's too much. It ate at him, so he kept the gun in hand just in case. In a way, it helped him feel better. His other hand pulled out the carton of cigs from his pocket before he lit another one. He returned to his casual position of leaning against the wall to ease the tension. With him remaining by the door made things harder for Vicky. She needed to find a way to move him, but to also... They know about us? If they knew about vampires, then they knew how to deal with vampires. This also meant that everything inside had some value to this vampire. So much so that he was willing to breach the masquerade and let all his little subordinates know the truth about the night. Fucking great. But nothing would stop Vicky. Not tonight. The man's head fell back and he returned to gazing up at the stars. It's now or never. Vicky flew at him. The second that he was at arm's length, she tackled him to the ground. Her hand covered his mouth before he screamed, and her fangs sank into his neck. Growl escaped, one that was grateful for the late-night meal. Her beast missed this feeling. The second that his blood touched her tongue, she lapped at the wound. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head, and her eyelids fluttered from the sensation overwhelming her body. More and more blood filled her mouth, slowly flowing down her throat. He'd die if she continued. Let it happen, the beast said. No, Vicky fought. She tore her fangs from the wound, leaving behind splatters of blood. It bubbled, waiting for her, but she knew she couldn't. To get rid of the evidence, she licked the wound closed and didn't let herself relish in the flavor. If she did, she wouldn't be able to stop herself from going all the way. She wasn't a murderer, not yet. Carefully, she laid the man onto the ground and wiped away the blood. There were no signs that he'd been attacked by a vampire, so she felt pretty safe leaving him there. Though, this made her wonder how much they knew about the kindred. She needed a gauge of what she was getting herself into. With that in mind, she listened for any other movement. There was none, so she used this chance and dug through his pockets. Never know what they might have, she told herself. Plus, she could do with a bit of extra cash. A wallet with some dollars, nothing much, and it made her wonder how much this vampire paid his employees. An ID, cell phone, keys, and a note. It was hastily folded and looked worn. Out of curiosity more than anything, she unfolded the paper. The contents were faded, written in pencil. Violet Patel, $500,000. $500,000? Vicky gasped before snapping her head in all directions to make sure no one heard her. No movement. She was still in the clear. Her eyes stared at the note in shock. That's how much they're paying for Violet? This vampire, Marcel, paid $500,000 to purchase one girl. Why Violet? It couldn't be because she's the daughter of some pastor. That didn't make sense. If anything, that would make vampires want to avoid the girl like the plague, not throw nearly $500,000 at her. But then again, perhaps this meant that there was something special about Violet. There were vampires and werewolves, as confirmed by Micah. Then who was to say that there weren't other creatures? What if Violet was something else? Did Violet even know? Then again, Vicky recalled how frantic the girl was over the phone. It didn't scream as if she had any idea of her own kidnapping, much less the supernatural world. All of this only left Vicky with more questions than answers. Best to get out of here before he wakes up, she reasoned as she folded the note and returned everything, but the cash, back to the unconscious man. With everything in place, she tried the door. Locked. Fuck, she hissed. Sneaking out the keys from the man's pocket, she tried the door again. Nope. Then she tried the phone. Dude didn't even use any of the biometric features that came with his smartphone. No fingerprint lock, no face recognition, just good old-fashioned PIN. No way am I going to be able to go through every combination in time. With failure after failure, Vicky returned everything to how it was before scanning her surroundings. Surely, there had to be another entrance other than through the metal rolling doors. Those would surely catch everyone's attention. She needed to keep the element of surprise, at least until she could figure out exactly what was going on. Perhaps. Her neck craned to look up. Gonna pray that there's a sunroof. She recalled seeing them in movies before, and if she had any luck left. Jumping as high as she could with her vampiric legs, she came up short. Another attempt didn't fare much better. What's the point of being a vampire if I can't even do this shit? She'd have to come up with another plan. She walked the entire building, looking for another entrance, but came up empty-handed. No access to the roof, no windows, not even another door. It seemed her options were limited. I guess I could wait and see if anyone comes out. Or maybe I can try and lure someone out. Dude's got a gun, but I don't know if it'll do shit against me. Picking up the gun, she scanned it. Looked like any other piece to her. Even the bullets looked normal. She put it back. The thought of walking straight into a room filled with humans with vampire killing tech wasn't appealing. But she would do what she had to do. The side door slowly opened, and Vicky dived around the corner. Her back pressed against the wall, and she froze, as if it would do anything to keep from being spotted. Eventually, the door stopped creaking. "You ready to switch out?" "Fuck, Jermaine, what happened?" A man's voice asked, quaking from the scene. "Fuck, was it really a vampire? Jermaine, Jermaine!" Shuffling noises followed after, and Vicky assumed that he fully assessed the body. "No bite marks," he said after a bit. "That means no vampire, right?" Another moment of silence. At least he's still alive. I should let the other guys know. More footsteps. And then there was the creaking from the door. Now's my chance. Leaping from the wall, her hand slid between the sliver of a crack in the doorway. Her palm stopped the door and she paused, waiting to see if the guy noticed. He didn't, and his footsteps faded. Waiting only a second longer, she opened the door more than a crack to give herself enough view of the inside. The coast was clear, and she carefully squeezed in. She had to hurry before that man returned to others to help their friend. Surely they were on alert. But now she had one foot in, and that was all she needed to find Violet. So this ended up being longer than I expected, both in the length of the video and how long it took me to kind of finish everything. I think I ended up being distracted with the Van Witch and other games that I'm planning on doing for the channel, and just in general. I think like tabletop role-playing games are just so fun for me now, and I've kind of been putting video gaming on the sidelines for this, and I get to draw and stuff, so it's really just igniting all those creative bursts inside of me. Thank you so much, everyone, and keep nice and cool, because I know, at least where I live, the temperature is getting ridiculously hot. And have a good day. Bye-bye.